So you should be able to unmute yourself. There's only 8 of us. There's 9 signed up, but 1 is in another time zone, so I was going to watch this back another time. So I hope you're well. I see Darren, familiar face. We've got about an hour and a half together, and I want to walk you through my own experience with coaching, the resources that I've used, and talk about some kind of structural logistics that might help you. But I guess before we get started, we should just probably all take a moment to introduce ourselves, and I can get to know you all as well. So I'm going to assume you know me. If you don't, just ask, but otherwise I'm going to assume you've kind of got my stuff through my website and you know who I am. But the last 3 years I've been doing coaching in schools around the world, and I'll kind of share some insights with you as we go through. So can I, I'll use your screen names. Unless you want to change your name, you can right click on your image. So let's go alphabetically. Anyone A or B or C?
I'm C.
All right, let's go with C.
I'm Celia. I'm head of school in a school in Nottinghamshire. I've been head of school for 3 years, and I'm keen to develop coaching with my leadership team in order to improve how we do feedback. It's something we've been looking at for a couple of years, and although we've done various insects and CPP on it, I still think actually maybe we still need a bit of coaching with that.
Okay, thank you, Celia. So I've made a note of that, head of school and feedback. D, Darren, are you next?
Yes, of course. I'm Darren Leslie. I am a teacher of physical education in a school in Clackmannshire in Scotland. I also have a whole school responsibility for learning and teaching. Just in January, I started with a small team of teachers who volunteered their time to look at using coaching as an approach for observations to help them identify areas for their own development. And obviously lockdown kind of stopped the journey on that as we were about to move on to our second cohort. So I'm just looking to learn from people a bit more experienced than me today.
Okay, thanks, Darren. Letter E, letter F. Who's next? G, H, I, J. Janine?
Hi. Am I on mute still?
No, we can hear you.
No. I'm assistant head at school in Rochdale, mainly focused on teaching and learning. We are starting with coaching in September because part of the early career framework is that we're going to offer coaches to all of our NQT +1s starting from September, and then from January up for all of our NQTs. We're doing it as a trust, and Giles Barrow, I don't know if you know him,
no.
He does a lot on transactional analysis. He's doing the training for any of our volunteers, but so that's all set up, but I'm just wondering if there's anything else that I need to know or need to think about, or how else it could be used.
Right, my mum's in Rochdale. What school are you at?
Oh, Wardle Academy.
Yeah, I know Wardle, yeah. Okay.
Oh, right, yeah. That's where I am.
Great. Who's next in the alphabet then? We've got some P's and R's. Oh, alphabetically speaking, P comes next, doesn't it? So is it Mr. McCarthy?
Hello, Ross. I'm an assistant head for teaching and learning. This September, just gone, we introduced voluntary 6 coaches and 6 coaches in staff. They had 3 meetings and then we went into lockdown. But what we did was we had coaches for our students. We had year 9 who were being coached by year 12. And just for information, the coaches within the students worked a lot better than the staff.
Right, okay.
But we hope to take it further in September.
I didn't catch your first name, sorry.
Paul.
Oh, have we worked before? I recognise your voice.
We have.
Yes, okay, good. Thanks, Paul. So we've met a few times. You'll recognise 1 or 2 techniques. So hopefully you can get some ideas from the group as well as some ideas a bit more deeper from me today. Who's next, Rob?
So I'm Rob. I'm head of science at a school in Shropshire, but I'm moving to take up another head of science role at another school in September. My understanding at the moment is that there's going to be a fair bit of development work in terms of developing practice within the department. Where I am currently, for the last few years as a school, we've been doing what we call research-based learning, working in triads, that kind of peer coaching model. And so looking at probably trying to develop something similar, and just looking at other alternative options and all that, everything that's available for the new role, really.
So you're starting in September?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Can you hear me? I'm not
I
too
can.
sure. Oh
Who's
yeah,
that?
so I'm Alex.
Alex.
Yeah. So I work in Manchester. I've been part of the coaching programme now for 5 years, so I'm second in the coaching team. We've been running the coaching programme really successful for the last 5 years, and we're just really looking for just new ideas. So I personally am in charge of the good to outstanding, but then we do coaching for NQTs, all of our new staff, and then we also offer coaching to all members of staff as well. So we've got teachers that have been in the school for 25 to 30 years. They're part of our coaching. They like to be, coached as well. So we're just looking for new ideas really and see whether we can spruce it up.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Alex. I've just brought in Sarah, who's just joining us. I'll give her a moment to kind of connect and stuff. So, I don't want to go through the theory and research. I'm going to assume that you know most of the issues in the system. I'm happy to talk about it, but I thought we'd be better just getting into a bit of practice and demonstrating some of the techniques that I use that I know work. Please shout if you want to go through some research and theory. Otherwise, I'll go straight to kind of 3 techniques, which I think need 20 minutes each. And what I'll try and do is I'll put us into breakout rooms where you can just talk in pairs. And if there's an odd person, then you can just stay on the line with me and you'll be the unlucky one. Sarah, are you there, Sarah? Don't know if she's logged in. I'll come back. She's logged off now. I've scared her off. Okay, so are we happy to go straight into some practical techniques?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just get some things on the slide. I'm going to send you. Right, if I just show you my screen, and then you can kind of see what I'm doing over here. So these are all the slides that I would do for a whole day inset day with a bit of theory to begin with, a bit of practice kind of morning after school, and then going into the logistics and structural issues. Now, I've worked with probably at least 10 schools over the last 12 to 18 months. And interestingly, one college, Hull College, that work's continued throughout lockdown. So we're doing a kind of launch to all staff on the 1st of July. I'm going to just send you through a few links and stuff. Firstly, if I just put this in the chat box for you, this will kind of be quicker for you to save me. Well, I'll send it through the Eventbrite ticket page anyway, but if I just put on the chat box here, and if you just save this link, here it comes now, that'll give you view access only to all the documents that I'll use. So if I just talk them through, this one, first of all, I'll probably need to update it. It's probably about a year and a bit old, but it's still a really good introduction document. So basically have a look through and steal and use what you think might be useful for your own coaching handbook. I'm sure you've all got your own versions, or if you haven't, use it as a template to start your own. And it goes through the differences between what a coach is, what a moderator is, the role of the teacher in the process, those types of things, quality assurance. I'm going to talk to you about the GROW process and the PIPL methodology. And then what I did in my own school as a deputy head was we built the Mark Plan Teach method, which I'm sure you've seen on my site, but we used it through coaching also. And these words here were essentially our common vernacular. So those were key terms that teachers worked on in CPD sessions, and these were the key words that were used as a focus for every observation. So that's really important to stress. And then the rest of the booklet's got question skills, listening skills, three very important coaching techniques. And then what I've done on the kind of page 12, 13 onwards is, I can't cover every question in the world, but I've tried to focus on classroom areas. Obviously, all these techniques can be used through line management. So Rob, you mentioned about being the head of the department. It'd be important to support and challenge colleagues. So you'll have to look at these techniques and reframe them for working with other adults rather than in the classroom itself. So there's lots there, and then there's just some templates at the back that you can copy and paste or use yourself. So that's the key document, this one, Coaching for Schools. There is also in here just a set of questions. This is actually in the main booklet, and we're going to come back to this one later. The next document I'm going to signpost to you is this little scaling card. Now, if I get one out of my little bag here, if you use the template or come up with your own one, if you get someone in your reprographics team to laminate it with the questions on the back and then the scale on the other side, that's a very handy resource for teachers to have in their planner. So I'm going to come back and use this later. So that's just the template for you. There's the slides. The tuning protocol is here. I'm going to come back to this later. This is a critical, sorry, this is an academic framework for critical friendships, and I'd like to trial it with you as a group once we've done the first two techniques. If I also just signpost, I'm sure one or two of you may have heard of John Bailey, one of the kind of original, trying to write Bailey in there, one of the original kind of behavior teachers TV kind of gurus going back to the kind of mid-90s. I worked with John. He lives in South London, so about half an hour's tube ride from where I am, and we've had a good relationship since we first worked together 20 years ago. We've developed this really good resource. I'm going to send this to you, and it's basically a 1-hour video, and it's got inside a 20-page script which walks through how people can use this tuning protocol in teams. And you've also got inside kind of 6 podcasts where you can hear the people go through the whole resource. So I hope that will be beneficial. And I suspect all of us who've done coaching, this will offer something new. And I think that will be quite useful for everyone watching. So that's the tuning protocol. This, if you're looking for a simple synopsis to introduce coaching to a department or a team, this is just my 2 or 3 page summary of everything from the main booklet. So, you know, considering all the fact, you know, should everyone be coached? Can an NQT be a coach? Can a support member of staff be a coach? Well, of course they can, but with lots of disclaimers. So there's all in there. And then there's just other resources I've picked up on my travels, from the Chartered College of Teaching, from the National College of Teaching and Learning, etc., etc. There's one other really important document. As you will all know, coaching isn't a quick whistle-stop fix. It's a cultural transition, it's a collaboration. I firmly believe teaching is a team sport, and it makes it very difficult with limited budget, league tables, people getting paid different salaries for doing the same role in different schools, all those kind of headaches that we have in the English system at least. And I know, Darren, watching in Scotland, coaching is pretty much part and parcel of teacher qualification in Scotland, so it'd be interesting to get Darren's views from a Scottish perspective. But on this screen, if I think very deeply about what I've done in my own work and now what I'm doing in schools around the world, this is it on a page. Now, you have to work out what phase 1 looks like in terms of a time frame and who is in cohort 1, cohort 2, and then before you introduce it to all staff, and who's leading this, who's driving this, because ultimately I'm going to assume most of, at least school leaders or heads of school watching, that if you are the person in charge of driving coaching, you are the quality control manager, so to speak, of the quality, sorry, the quality assurance manager of the quality control. So that's the coaches that go around the whole school. And I've kind of outlined here. Now I've got videos articulating me doing this. I'm going to just signpost 2 blogs that I want you to reference. So this is all recorded, so you can just watch back the video later. The first one is called a 30-day plan. Now, I guess it's not necessarily 30 days in sequence, it's 30 days over 2 or 3 years. And what I tried to articulate most of all was, for years I was chasing consistency as a school leader through appraisal, through CPD, and through teaching and learning observations. And I guess when I was bitten on the bum by Ofsted, I thought on my travels since, we're chasing the wrong thing. Teachers don't want consistency, although school leaders do to a degree, but what we need is coherence and clarity. So what I've articulated here in this short blog is just what these days would look like if you're wanting to transform your school teaching and learning culture. So that's a good, interesting read. That's called the 30-day teaching and learning plan, which supports this. And I'll come back to this later, because I think once we go through the practical techniques, I guess to transform school cultures, we need that team sport rowing the boat together. So this document's critical in all of this. The next blog is, let me see, CPD plan, I think it's called. And what I've called it is a 9-point plan. I can find it. I might just, yeah, 9-point plan. And what this has is the challenges that we all face as teachers. In fact, I will try that again. It didn't come through. That's the one. So what I've got on here for you is, if I just start with this chart here, I guess the first question to ask each of you is, where do you see yourself on this slide? So in terms of not just you professionally, which is a question in itself, but your team. So in Rob's case, your science team, or in Celia's case, your school. So can I just get, if we just do it alphabetically, and then at some point we're going to breakout rooms, can I just get you to have a think, where are you on this scale? Are you on the left, on the right, in the middle, or parts of the school, parts not? And then just explain why. So Celia, can I start with you? Let me see if I can put this slide a bit bigger for everyone. Let me see if I can just dig that one out. If it's not in there, I'm going to get it elsewhere. Sorry, bear with me, folks. I'll get this up in a second. Nearly there. This is my keynote slide. Okay. And this one. So while that loads up, so what we've got on the left is accountability. So things such as compliance and frequency. So a good example in terms of teaching and learning is you will mark with a purple pen of progress once a week, for example. Sometimes one kink in the wheel might be a leader. And when I say leaders, I don't mean a head teacher. I mean anyone with a teaching and learning responsibility. So it could just be a second in the maths department, second in charge, with certain qualities that are undesirable. You know, I don't want to mention the word bullying, but those types of things. External pressures, parent influence, grades, league tables, Ofsteds coming, those types of things. On the other side, you've got Ross, the experienced teacher, teaching a very long time, doesn't want to take part in CPD, doesn't want to be at the front, doesn't want to film themselves teach, doesn't want to be observed or observe others, doesn't think that they need to read research or books, doesn't want to necessarily work with the NQTs, all sorts of things like that. Closing doors, that type of dialogue. And I think you'll get one or two in most schools who've lost their mojo. And then in the middle, I guess this is what I've seen on my travels, is that efficient culture where teachers and schools are facilitated to have the time to talk about teaching on a regular basis. The time's protected. Knowing what I've read and researched about memory throughout lockdown, those sessions are 15 to 30 minutes in length, which is great for cognitive load. And it's research informed as well as pedagogical informed. So watch Ross, who we think's a great teacher, teach a car crash lesson, and let's talk about it. And also bust a few mental health myths that you don't have to be a shiny teacher, you don't always have to have your books marked, those types of things. So let me just get this up full size, and I hope I kind of explained the kind of what I've seen on my travels. And I guess the question to you all is, he says trying to find it, here it is here, is where are you on this? So if we start with that, and then we'll do 3 techniques. So Celia, can I start with you?
Yes, of course. I mean, I would say for our school as a collective, if I think about it, we're sort of partway between the accountability and autonomy. I just started reading up on the visible learning approach, and I'd attended a conference with John Hattie and things. So we were actually moving towards that idea of that team efficacy. And, you know, as part of our developing subject leaders, we've been trying to encourage staff to look more at that research informed base. So as a primary school, you know, we've joined different subject associations so that they can see specific research based on different subjects as well. But at the same time, we have those external pressures because we're part of a MAT as well. So, you know, we're sort of I met with the vice CEO of the MAT just before lockdown, and when I talked about what I wanted to do on our pathway towards amazing, which is what we're looking at the moment, is actually was quite, you know, excited by the fact that I was involved in the visible learning and that team efficacy. So I would say we're part way between that accountability and that autonomy.
Okay. Do you have many kind of teachers that are kind of examiners for exam boards and those types of things?
No.
Do you have teachers that are reading research and sharing it in CPD?
They tend to be part of my leadership team. Although I have got one young member of staff that's actually starting to see the value in that CPD and what they can bring to it. And actually as part of how we've been using staff meeting times over lockdown is look at this CPD, what about that CPD? So we've actually been directing staff to various ones, and that's actually enthused others to take the initiative, you know, and find their own CPD.
Okay, great. Darren, what about you? Tell us how it is in Scotland with coaching.
With me and my school, we're more between the right and the left. I tend to, in my role as kind of the school lead for teaching and learning, I'm kind of left to my own devices a little bit. And I try and share my research, the research informed kind of stuff, the regular CPD. I set up the coaching kind of program with some support from a deputy head, although I had to kind of drag them into it. We're just kind of started to try and get an atmosphere where we talk about learning and teaching. You know, when I first came into post, I tried to get everyone around the table in small groups. Let's talk about teaching, and it was like you could hear a pin drop. So we're trying to get there. Observations, it's the same old. A teacher comes in, or you want to do question, go and watch John, who's in maths, but John was good at questioning 20 years ago. No one's actually.
You've got any reasons why your teachers are shy about talking about teaching?
It's just not the culture. It's not the culture in the school I'm in. I mean, some schools. I mean, I've worked in 4 schools now, and a couple of the schools that the culture's been better. It entirely is determined on kind of the leadership of the school. I mean, Scotland is quite far away from the accountability that I think's experienced in England. I've never taught in England. I'm only going on like the echo chamber that I have in my Twitter feed. So we're not, the accountability is just not there.
Yeah, and I've worked in Scotland a few times now, and I know that by default teachers in Scotland are offered coaching, and it's a qualified profession and those types of things. But interesting that you mentioned that you know, people are quite shy about talking about teaching. I would say probably from my travels that the happier schools are where it's facilitated in the middle, where they're regularly talking about teaching, and it is very much driven from the leadership team to a point where there's a lovely expression my last head teacher called power from the floor, where you've got all your teachers sitting in groups and tables talking about a particular pedagogy, and the power of their conversations leads the team, and often their head teacher's always present, and I think that's the key. Before I come to Janine next, if I just come out my slides briefly, and last night I posted a really simple blog, and I was actually going to just share it because I wanted to just talk about the classrooms that I see on my travels. I'm always getting my camera out taking pictures, and I was going to shape the blog simply about displays. But what I thought I would do is post a picture of the classroom, so it's a nice little CPD opportunity for you to share with your schools to talk about teaching. And I've posted 5 questions for each photograph. If you were observing in this classroom, where would you position yourself? If you were at team teaching in this science classroom, how would you cope with 60 kids and another teacher over 2 hours instead of 1? If you were teaching in this forest school, how would you upload your registration to a management information system when you're outside in 35 degrees heat? If you were in these classrooms with these displays, all these different displays, do they add to cognitive load? Are they learning opportunities, or are they cluttered, wasted spaces? And the last one here is 2 international classrooms in the same school. This is a Canadian classroom. I've ruined the answer here for you. This is a British classroom, but they're on the same corridor, 2 schools within one building. One with uniform, one without, I won't tell you who. One where you can see round tables, group tables in squares, no displays, lots of displays. So you might find that really interesting, just a simple way to get teachers talking about teaching. Janine, are you there? Janine?
Hello, yes.
Hi, Janine. Where are you on this scale?
If it's gone.
It's loading up, there we go.
Oh, okay. If we're talking about coaching at the minute, I'd say we're between the accountability and autonomy, because I don't think some staff know that they're doing coaching yet.
Right.
They're doing it, but they don't know that they're doing it.
Okay.
You know, because
what makes you say that? Let me just unpick that.
Probably because they think that they're being mentors. So, for example, we had 11 NQTs last year, and the quality of the mentoring that they got was very different depending on which subjects they're in. And some of the most effective ones are doing coaching. They just think that, you know, perhaps if you said to them, are you doing coaching here? They might realise that they are, but they're just taking on that NQT traditional role.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. What about your whole school?
I think it depends very much on the departments. So it's easier in perhaps the smaller departments. So MFL, for example, they've got a very nice, because there's 4 of them, 2 are more experienced, 2 are new. So it perhaps lends itself really well to coaching. And they've got the time for it as well.
Okay.
Whereas some of the bigger departments perhaps don't have that spread of experience and youth to either practice or hone the skills. And you've got a bigger diversity of skill set. So, you know, some of our most experienced teachers aren't some of our best teachers as well.
Yeah, so that phase plan I showed you is the challenge to try and move towards that model across the whole school, which is a real challenge for everybody. Thanks, Janine. Paul McCarthy. Paul, are you there?
Yeah.
Hi, Paul. Where are you on in your team, your school, on this scale?
Well, there's some colleagues who are in absence. They're old, they're settled, they rely on the lead practitioners, they look to SLT to give advice. They're not paid as much, so why should they engage? Why should they bother? The SLT have tried to move into some form of accountability for the big O word, but I must admit he's a new head teacher with a few new SLT besides myself. He's trying to move to autonomy, but it's a small niche of staff. So it's really, at the moment, it's an implicit rather than an explicit diet or menu that the staff are receiving. And it's really who shouts the loudest and who actually is listened to.
How long has your head teacher been in post?
He's been in post since September.
Right, okay. And in terms of your CPD, Paul, what does it look like? Is it just 5 inset days or every week or something like that?
No, it's more in the role of autonomy, because myself as the teacher and learning, I work with the head of CPD. We try and do like clusters in the morning or the afternoon. There is some problem with the aspect of absence because of time, and there's still a presence of the unions and staff watching the clock. But he has managed to, as you say, he's always there. And it's normally about a 40-minute session each fortnight, not every week, each fortnight.
Okay.
Not delivered by us as SLT, it's delivered by someone who's got an idea, someone who's doing a piece of research, someone who may have gone away. So
you're on your way?
We're on our way, yeah, but we just need to, we need to get with the apps.
Okay, thank you. Rob, what about you in your science department, where you currently are?
Yeah, I think with our department, we're probably getting quite close to autonomy from the accountability side of things. The school itself, the culture has been very much of accountability in recent years. And whilst the school would like to think it's trying to move towards autonomy, I'd probably suggest that SLT are perhaps, they want that to be the illusion, if you like, and it's perhaps not actually the reality. But within the department, you know, we're very lucky. We've got lots of hardworking staff who allow us to kind of get towards autonomy more quickly than perhaps other pockets of the school are getting there, which is interesting from that point of view. Because where I'm going in with my new role, I think I'm probably going to be approaching autonomy from the other side. And I think certainly going back 2 or 3 years, they would be in the absence category, and it's about moving the other way, perhaps.
What do you think your current team would say on this scale about not necessarily you, but the team?
I think they would probably put the team, certainly in terms of the research informed and the open door, there's a lot of sharing of practice that goes on. Mm-hmm. There's still very much those pressures. We are, if you like, the flagship school for the MAT that we're in. And there's as long as I've been there, there's been a fear of SLT. And there's that fear of being caught out. And certainly members of staff who've been there for more than 2 or 3 years have still got that feeling of we need to make sure that we don't get caught out for something here.
Okay. Right, great. Thank you, Rob. Alec, are you there?
Yeah, so I'd say we're more in the autonomy. Obviously, I said coaching's been going on for about 5 years in our school. We've got about 7 coaches on the team, so we're quite a big department. Mm-hmm. And it's just well known that as soon as you come in as an NQT or a new starter, the coaching program, we introduce ourselves before you start in the induction day and things like that. So it's something that we start straight away with. We, as CPD as a whole school, we have teach meets once every half term.
Yeah.
So in the teach meet, we all meet in the hall as staff. There's well over 100 staff members, and we'd sit within our departments and similar departments, and then we'd be given something like a topic like higher ability or something like that, and there would be class teachers, not really leadership. It would depend on who's got a speciality in it, and
right.
They'd share their thoughts and everything like that, and then we're all able to sit together, and then we're given time during that teach meet to like make changes to lessons and schemes of works and things like that. So we all adapt our schemes of work as we go. And then we've got CPD if you're on the coaching program, good to outstanding. Yeah, so, and we get emails a lot of the time, like if you've found something that you think's really good, like dual code and stuff like that on the internet, mm-hmm. we're told to share it with all staff, so you get a lot. So we're quite a
so you think you're in, it sounds like you're in the middle.
Yeah, we share, we are all about the sharing. Sometimes there might be too much information, but somebody's always got ideas, and we're always looking at new ways. We are very much research informed.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you all a question, and we'll go back in reverse order. So I'll start with Alec and then go back to Rob and Paul and Janine, Darren and Celia. In terms of graded lessons, what do you currently do, Alex?
Yeah, we do have a graded lesson. So it'd be 1 every year. And then obviously if it's anything below a good, we then put support in through the head of department. If that still doesn't work, then the coaching team would help and support.
Okay, so I'm here as an impartial judge. Are you aware of the research on graded lessons?
Yes, I am aware, and I think the leadership team have done a lot of research into this themselves. We have where we get a week's notice for the observation, and at this moment in time, I think leadership have decided to stay with the grading.
Okay, thank you. Rob, what about you in your current school and your new school? What's the state of the nation for graded lessons?
So the official line is that we don't have graded lessons, but in reality, we've gone from having 4 grades to having, I think, 6 unofficial grades, in that lessons are graded, or lessons are judged according to lots of different categories, but within each category you'd be put into outstanding, emerging outstanding, secure good, etc. So in some respects, it does allow for that growth, because all teachers are getting they're getting a bit more feedback in terms of areas for development and areas of strength. But at the end of the day, it is still very much a case of where do most of your categories fall, and where does that place you, and does that put you into this group of outstanding or outstanding teachers, or does that put you into a group that are deemed to require more support?
Okay. Question: are any of your middle leaders not in the right category?
In terms of within my department, everybody is, all of the TLR holders in the department are usually in that secure good moving upwards category.
Okay, thank you, Paul. What about you and your school?
We've moved away from grading. We have 6 lesson observations throughout the year, once each half term. You could say it's kind of like 1, 2, and 3 Ofsted, but we don't use that language, and we were very much they were fearful of us as SLT, so we had to shift. So we use the idea of emerging, engaging, enhancing, and embedding. And if there's anybody that comes up, emerging, then obviously with my role, I'll use the lead practitioners and maybe a post holder within that department to help the person move on with whatever aspect of pedagogy they may have. But I've been at the school 5 years with the new head in post since September. In the aspect of teaching and learning and grading of observations and lessons, he's moving away from the fear factor.
Right.
So we're moving more into autonomy, but we're still not there. It's a journey that we're all working on.
Sure, thank you. Janine?
We don't do lesson gradings at all now. We don't have lesson observations in the traditional sense either. So we do drop-ins, and they can be as many and as frequent as we want. We try and keep to 10 to 15 minutes, but it really depends on what standard we see when we go in. And if they just meet our school standards, which are teaching standards, but it doesn't matter to a certain extent what we see, because everybody gets what worked well's and EBIs.
Okay.
So it's all developmental. But there's more for like certain groups of staff. So in the early years, or if they're new to our school, they'll get a lot more.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to drop-ins in a moment. Darren?
I don't think we've ever had graded observations up in Scotland. As a school, we don't really have many observations. What we have is each department has a mini in-house inspection within a 2-year cycle. We have a 6-point scale we use a framework called How Good Is Our School, from excellent down to weak. So the department gets a grade, and the feedback is generally as a department rather than individually, and that happens once every 2 years. And
could you just let everyone know, in Scotland you have a login to a professional portfolio, don't you? Is that with GTCS or with
GTCS? Yes. So we have the General Teaching Council. It's called My GTCS, and every 5 years in a 5-year cycle, your profile you get assessed against the whatever standards you're on. So I'm on the standards for middle leaders. We have NQT standards, we have long-term career standards, we have middle leader standards, and we have the standards for headship. So
a bit like a health check as you go through your career.
Yes, so most teachers in Scotland will regularly update their online profile with so for example, this CPD, I'll put this on my profile in the next few days.
Great. Celia?
We don't have any formal gradings. We don't do formal observations either. Like Janine, we do drop-ins. I can do them, or anybody from my leadership team can do them, and we generally just make some notes on what we see, and then at the end of each half term we'll identify positives across the school, areas of strengths, possible areas of weakness, and then we signpost to staff, the areas for development, who they might want to go and observe, and then we allocate some time for them to go in and do that peer coaching with them, really. I mean, obviously if we do a learning walk or a drop-in and we see something that we've got big concerns about, then we will speak to that member of staff at our earliest convenience, but no formal gradings at all.
All right, thank you, everyone. So we'll come back to that point. I'm not going to dwell too much on gradings anymore, but I mean, in the original slides, you've got, you know, in England, I know Darren has got Walavan, Scotland somewhere, but, you know, attrition rates, I believe announced today that early careers framework's coming in sooner, why teachers leave the profession, graded scorecards as teachers across the country, across a school in this case on this slide, what the research says about graded lessons for people that are in a research school that's driven. This is poor proxy, so these are things that you can see but don't tell you nothing about learning. And then Blue Sky Education, I know most people will have used them or have heard of them. I used these in 3 secondary schools over a decade. This is their latest research they shared with me in June last year. About 30% of schools still grade their teachers. And that varies. I won't go through all these, but if you look at all these, they kind of vary. How's the methodology gathered? What sources do you look at? Who conducts the observations? Informal versus formal, and if we add in appraisal there equally. So there's loads of data there, so I'm not going to skip that for now. I'm going to go straight to, I'm just going to signpost some books on coaching. I'm sure you've read your own. I'm sure you've got some others. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 on here that you've seen before, not yet read. I'd recommend all of these. I'm going to talk particularly about leverage leadership, which has really transformed my own practice. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips as we go through that book. One thing I'll signpost on slide 34, something for later. If you click on this, I've done a little bit of research into what are the hallmarks of effective CPD. Most of us will say these 6 things. And of course we want to buy in. Some things need to be directed, some things can be a choice. Occasionally we want someone coming in, we want things to be subject specific with loads of examples, of course, but what this meta-analysis looks at is all the past published pieces of research on what effective CPD is, and then challenge that notion that these aren't the hallmarks. Actually what is one-to-one conversations with teachers. So in the blog, I've essentially written a very simple summary, so I'll just put it on here just to record it so you can see where it is, called Effective Teacher Professional Development. Essentially, add a cup of tea and a slice of cake, put your teachers in pairs, and have conversations about teaching and learning on a weekly basis, are my conclusions from this research. So I'll just put that one there. I'm going to go straight into a first important model, and I know Darren or Paul potentially have seen this before. But what I want to ask you, first of all, is how good are you at lesson observations? If you're in charge of coaching, you have that privilege going to observe other teachers, do you do it well? Now, I think I've taught 20,000 lessons, seen 40 or 50,000 lessons in my career. And I discovered this model in my doctoral studies 2 years ago, and it flicked a light bulb on, and I thought, oh my God, I've been doing things wrong. So I'm going to introduce here an unstructured model, then a semi-structured, and then a structured model. I'm going to show you a video clip, and we're just going to watch 4 minutes. Now, what I would like you to do is, if you can have a bit of paper and a pen to hand, and what we're going to do in observation 1 is you're just going to make some notes as you watch the video, and then we'll talk about it together. And what I'll do after the video is I'll say less, and I just want you to talk to each other about what you saw. Okay? So just have a pen to hand, and then I'll come back to this template and I'll introduce lesson 2. So here's my question to you all. How good are you at lesson observations? I believe, and it's quite a provocation to make, that learning walks are a waste of time if not done well. I'll add that disclaimer. So I grab you, we go on a learning walk, and then we walk into this chap's classroom for the first 4 minutes of the lesson when it starts. And then at the end, I pull you out, just like maybe an inspector would do or a school leader, and we talk about what we saw. So give me a shout if you can't hear this video. Let me just press play, and I'll turn the volume up. And just make some notes as we watch the first 4 minutes.
Silently start that survey, grab that piece of paper. Hey, how you doing? Sit at seat 25 for me for right now. Silently start that and pick up that piece of paper. Period 3, I see you silently starting your survey. That's the expectation. Hi, good to see you. Sit in seat 26, please. which is like by the projector screen. Period 3, I look around and I see people silently working on that survey. Good. Can you please sit in seat 4 with the 4 on the back of it and silently start your survey and grab that piece of paper too. Hi, Luis. Good to see you. Luis, sit at seat 7 and silently start your survey. Hi. Good to see you. Sit at seat 18, right behind Christina. 7. Young man, what's your name? Giovanni? Giovanni, come back. Hi. Good to see you, Relly. Relly, I want you to sit at seat 15. It's got the 15 on the back of it, and here's your survey. Giovanni, I know you were probably talking about your seat, but you can't even whisper about that. So that's your verbal warning, okay? Go to your seat and silently start your work. Period 3, it is great to see you. I need about 3.5 more minutes of silent work on this survey. So in total silence, keep filling out this survey. You can see the amount of time left right up here. Go ahead and work on the front and back of the survey. Don't do that. That's okay. That's fine. Hi, Robert. Period 3, you continue to meet every one of my expectations about silently working on the survey. If you finish with the survey early, read the piece of paper that looks like that. Are you done with the survey yet? This has happened before. Go ahead and start on this for right now, okay? It's not a problem.
Okay, so we watched the first 4 minutes. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put you into 2 rooms in 2s and 3s. Could you just quickly, I'll give you literally 2 minutes, just share what you thought about the lesson. Okay, so you should get something coming up on your screen. Let me just escape my slides and do this another way. So here we go, 2 rooms, 3 people in each room, and I'll see you in 2 minutes. So if you press something on your screen, that should put you in a particular room. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So we're going to do it again. Now, this time I'm going to introduce a semi-structure. And at this point, if we look at this template again, so on a blank bit of paper, in here, if you could write the word teacher, on this side, pupils, and then we're going to look at 3 parts of the lesson. I've got my little doorbell here, definitely a new one. I'm going to ring this bell at a certain time, and what I would like you to do, I'm going to say the word teacher or pupil. If you can just switch your microphones off, folks, behind the scenes, that will help with the recording. So when I press teach, when I ring the bell, I'll say teacher or pupil, and when I do, I want you to record what's happened kind of 3 or 4 seconds after the bell. So let's watch the next video. This time I'm going to add in semi-structure. So the semi-structure is the bell ringing, but let me give you a bit more context. Let's go on a learning walk together. This is the first lesson of the academic year and the first time the teacher is meeting the class. The teacher is an NQT and the focus of the learning walk is behaviour management. Okay, so you've got a bit of context before you go in the door. Here's the video. We'll watch the first 3 minutes, 30 seconds this time. And listen for my bell. I'll say teacher or pupil, and then you record.
Survey 14. Seat 14, please. And then silently start that survey. Grab that piece of paper. Hey, how you doing? Sit at seat 25 for me for right now. Silently start that and pick up that piece of paper. Period 3, I see you silently starting your survey. That's the expectation. Hi, good to see you. Sit in seat 26, please, which is like by the projector screen. Period 3, I look around and I see people silently working on that survey. Can you please sit in seat 4 with the 4 on the back of it and silently start your survey and grab that piece of paper too. Hi, Luis. Good to see you. Luis, sit at seat 7 and silently start your survey. Hi. Good to see you. Sit at seat 18, right behind Christina. 7.
Pupils.
Young man, what's your name? Giovanni? Giovanni, come back. Hi. Good to see you, Relly. Relly, I want you to sit at seat 15. It's got the 15 on the back of it. And here's your survey. Giovanni, I know you were probably talking about your seat, but you can't even whisper about that. So that's your verbal warning. Okay. Go to your seat and silently start your work. Period 3, it is great to see you. I need about 3.5 more minutes of silent work on this survey. So in total silence, keep filling out this survey. You can see the amount of time left right up here.
Teacher.
Go ahead and work on the front and back of the survey. That's okay. That's fine. Hi, Robert. Period 3, you continue to meet every one of my expectations about silently working on the survey. If you finish with the survey early, read the piece of paper that looks like that.
Teacher? Okay, I'm going to pause the video a minute shorter this time. I'm going to put you back into breakout rooms. You might be in the same or different people. It'll be totally random. And again, this time, could you talk about those those 3 moments the bell rang and just compare notes, okay? Hey, Janine, I could see you're on your own, so I came over to...
I was thinking, I don't know what to do either, to either get back or tell anybody.
Tell me some quick things initially about that video and I'll take us back in.
I just thought that, you know, if it's an NQT, it's the first lesson. He's got his seating plan, he's meeting them at the door, he's got his expectations, he's telling them, you know, I see this, I should see that, this is what you should be doing. Mm-hmm. Is not trying to give them anything where they can fail. Mm-hmm. He's trying to be super positive with them by telling them what he expects, and then when they do it, then he's praising them for it.
How did your view compare to version 1?
That is generally the context that I like to see. That's what we encourage at Wardle. You know, that sort of be really explicit with the children. We do a lot of LEMOV. Strong starts is an embedded part of our practice. So what I would have liked to have seen was when he was going around and checking that there was perhaps a little bit more conversational points about what the pupils were writing. Okay. But because it's a survey, and I don't know what it was a survey of, there might not have been that opportunity to perhaps say capital letter or...
I'm going to pop back to the room to bring everyone back, but thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so this should be coming back.
I was thinking, you've got stuck with me again.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show another version where the teacher asks a question instead, and I'm going to show the exact same film again, and again, just the process is how does it change your thoughts as an observer?
Okay.
So it'll all become clear. Everyone should be back in about 10 seconds or so, I hope. Let me just double check. Seem to have lost a few people. Hi, Paul. Looks like we've lost everybody. I probably shouldn't do that again. I'll hang on the line for everyone to join back in. Hey, Paul, you all right?
Hello, yeah.
Hi, everyone. Did we all lose connection? Okay, I won't do breakouts this time, so I'll go straight to the next version. So this time, folks, we're going to do what's called a structured model. Okay, structured, and in this box at the bottom, could you write teacher, and on this side pupil, so singular. We're going to look at 1 pupil, and we'll do 3 episodes. Again, I'll ring the bell 3 times. And when I say teacher or pupil, just record what's happening. So let me go to that slide. And this is the context. So we're going to go on a learning walk. We're going to watch the first 4 minutes of a lesson. It's the first lesson of the academic year, the first time the teachers meet in the class. They're an NQT, but this time they have asked you for help. And they've actually helped shape your focus by saying, how best can us support him with this one student who has special needs? So in the video, I want you to look at this girl here. And when I ring the bell and say pupil, I want you to record what she is doing and ignore all the others. Okay, so we're going to watch the first 3 minutes.
You're not sharing your screen just now, Ross.
Right, okay, sorry, thanks for telling me. It looks like that last system's kicked me out of everything. So you missed all of that, okay. Right, can you see it now?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
On this template, got teacher here. On this side, pupil, just one child, and I'm going to record 1, 2, 3 episodes only and make notes. When I ring the bell, just record what the pupil's doing. There's the context. The teacher said, can you help me with this one child, rather than we go in with a clipboard. Okay, that's the key. When we look at this video here, the clip of the same teaching lesson, we're looking at this girl here on the right in the purple t-shirt. So I ring the bell, you ignore the time, just when I ring the bell, record what she's doing or what the teacher's doing.
14. Seat 14, please. And then silently start that survey. Grab that piece of paper. Hey, how you doing? Sit at seat 25 for me for right now. Silently start that and pick up that piece of paper. Period 3, I see you silently starting your survey. That's the expectation. Hi, good to see you. Sit in seat 26, please, which is like by the projector screen. Period 3, I look around and I see people silently working on that survey. Good. Hey. Can you please sit in seat 4 with the 4 on the back of it and silently start your survey and grab that piece of paper too. Hi, Luis. Good to see you. Luis, sit at seat 7 and silently start your survey. Hi. Good to see you. Sit at seat 18 right behind Christina. 7. Young man, what's your name? Giovanni? Giovanni, come back. Good to see you, Relly. Relly, I want you to sit at seat 15. It's got the 15 on the back of it. And here's your survey. Giovanni, I know you were probably talking about your seat, but you can't even whisper about that. So that's your verbal warning. Okay. Go to your seat and silently start your work. Period 3, it is great to see you. I need about 3.5 more minutes of silent work on this survey.
Student.
So in total silence, keep filling out this survey. You can see the amount of time left right up here. Go ahead and work on the front and back of the survey.
Teacher.
Don't do that. That's okay. That's fine. Hi, Robert.
So I'm going to just turn the sound off on the video. So before I just get comments from yourselves, we've looked at this one video again 3 times, but this time we're looking at a child, and the teacher's asked, how can you help me support her special needs? You know, interventions, starting on the right side of the survey, those types of things. But what I really want to ask you is, how did this observation compare to the first one as an observer? Over to you. Feel free to unmute yourself. Let's just take a couple of minutes to just talk about that model, and then we'll go into another practical idea. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first. The last one had a very clear focus, so there was actual purpose to the learning work or the observation, whereas the first one, it was like a blank slate. We could have just spoke about absolutely anything. There was no shared understanding of what we were actually going to be looking for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Anybody else?
I was going to say that it's about having that level of focus, isn't it? The first time when we didn't have any context for the room that we were in, we didn't know, you know, it looked like the first lesson of the year, but we didn't know that it could have been at any point. But then when you give the context and you've got that focus, you're able to tailor the comments, and the things that are written down would actually make sense and have an impact on that teacher's development compared to the things that we perhaps wrote down on the first video.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Anybody? Celia?
No, I was going to say, yeah, you can see that obviously, you know, once you've got that, right, this is what we want to focus on, then you can actually, you know, receive more, you know, give more clearer feedback on actually what you can observe, and that can then help support that member of staff as well, which again, I know is what we've done previously with triads and things, because it then helps the staff to identify what it is they want to, you know, support with, really.
Sure. Janine or Paul? Janine first.
I thought it was interesting because there'd be a lot less that you'd be talking to the teacher about using the third version, because there was a lot of times where other things were happening in the classroom. So if you were wanting to really hone the technique, then that would be the best way to do it. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it was somebody perhaps who is new to either your school and they're doing something inherently wrong that doesn't fit the DNA of your school, you'd need to give them that much wider version of what they're doing so that they can quickly amend some of those things. So it depends on what the purpose is really behind going in.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Paul?
The context, it was clearer. So as an observer, you were more specific. You put your hat for support on, and hopefully the feedback to the young teacher would have been clearer because you were focused on the one specific idea. How can I best help the student, rather than, as Janice said, just talking generally, you see everything that goes wrong. The structured observation was work on one technique, one issue, one thing that can build and support that colleague, which will then give that colleague support to work on areas that maybe there is and they have got concerns or you find concerns with. But the structured question gave both the observer and the observee more focus. It was worthwhile.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Alec?
To be honest, what I was thinking of when we do coaching is the first one, which was unstructured, is very much what it's like the first time as a coach we go into the lesson, because we're not really too sure what our focus is going to be. And then when you start to then have your meetings after that, either you will maybe come up with some things they need to focus on, or even better, the teacher will know what they need to focus on. My concern would be that the teacher on the structured one, looking at that just one student, obviously they can solve and put things in place for that, but there were other issues in the lesson that then would gonna go unnoticed if that was your main focus, if that makes sense. So would the middle one, I don't know, just being the coach, that like, would the middle one work so that you ensure?
I mean, it's a good question. Obviously we're watching this for the first time out of context. We don't know what's been said before. I can do this with any video, obviously without that context. I actually don't know if it's their very first lesson. I made that up to steer your focus as an observer, and in many ways I influenced potential bias. So a couple of things to signpost to help that. On the blog, if you just type in the word bias, a couple of things to just signpost. Firstly, there's this one, which I'm going to recommend you look at, and I think it's that blog from memory. I'll just open this one up. First of all, I got really interested in the psychological bias we experience as teachers or school leaders. So I've got 15 on a card here. and I've explained what they are, and then given you an example of what a conversation might look like around the table or in a lesson observation. You might find that very interesting. We all have difficult conversations. We receive them and we have to give them. So that might upskill in terms of what we think when we're saying these difficult things. The other one is a simple resource that could be stuck on outside of a door. So I think it was Alec that mentioned on the first observation you go in as a coach, it's a bit of a kind of carte blanche. There's no real focus. Whereas if the leadership team can do more with the middle leaders, collect school priorities as well as teacher priorities, and then amalgamate this into some kind of database, the teacher can then have on this card, for example, there I've put an example, when I ask a question, Darren seems to keep calling out in the lesson, so I want to reduce that. So when you come into my lesson, that's the focus I'm working on for the term ahead. So it allows an observer or someone who's never come into the classroom before to know what exactly the teacher's working on in that classroom. I guess my question to you all is, again, you need to take this all into context, but how many times have you ever visited a lesson without a focus, whether it's for an informal learning walk or a formal observation? I know times are changing, but I know it's still prevalent today, but I think there must be well over 9/10 of the observations that I did were without a focus beforehand. So it's just something to think about. The next key strategy is this. So I think I'm going to be probably 20-25 minutes at a push. So if you need to go, just hang up and I'll record it and I'll send it to you over. But I want to just model this one with one of you and the rest of you just observe, and then I'll do one last strategy as a group where we all take part. So I think what I'm going to ask Celia, if you can unmute yourself, and everyone else is just going to watch this model that's used from Leverage Leadership. It's called the PIPL, and it's a great way to structure feedback conversations. I use this with kids. I use it with difficult conversations, and I definitely use it in observations. Ideally, it needs 15 to 20 minutes for an observation feedback, but I'm going to show you how you can try and do it in 5 to 7 minutes tops. So what we need to do first of all, I've got a little card here in the slides. It's a bit more detailed, so obviously you need to delete all the text. So essentially you've just got the key commands here. But if I take all, I'll leave this on the screen. I want you to be aware, people watching, that I'm going to follow this method. Okay, now in this case, I don't work with Celia, we don't know each other, so I don't know what she's already done well. So in this case, I'm going to ignore this and go straight to probe. Okay, and if I can just get you, Celia, if you're willing to kind of, obviously it's recorded, so if you don't want to disclose certain things, then feel free to make it up, for example. So you mentioned at the start, Celia, that feedback was your priority. Why is that the case?
It's because I suppose it links with the fact that we are moving away from the idea of distant marking. So it's all about what we want to try and do is that feedback within a lesson in order to move learning on.
Okay. Can I ask you to give me 2 or 3 things you've already tried?
We've looked at, we tried to implement aspects of teaching and learning communities.
Yeah.
Is something that we've tried to implement with that, and then also the use of live marking within lessons.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I'd say it's that balance between live marking, live feedback, which I would say is what some of our staff seem to be struggling with. When I've tended to give feedback, when I've done some learning walks, I tend to say, you'd all increase your steps when you keep doing the live marking. Actually, you should be doing some live feedback. But I sometimes think some of them would reach 10,000 steps in one lesson.
What have you tried before that's worked?
Well, of the things that I've used before is like little mini plenaries within a lesson. You know, a bit like a mini quiz kind of thing, with regard to, I don't know if you've ever come across it, it's an app called Plickers, that, you know, I found that works really well, and some of my staff that I've spoken to about it have actually found that that's quite effective for feedback within a lesson. And then from that, then they've been able to then tweak the learning within the lesson to either address a certain group or actually go, oh my goodness, there's quite a few errors here, or misconceptions and things.
Okay.
So that use of flickers we found works really well.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I've understood. You're saying that feedback's an issue and that you've got communities in place and your staff are often trying to do too much. So you kind of want to narrow it down to kind of live marking, live feedback, maybe revisiting mini plenaries because it's worked before. Yourself and others maybe suggesting great ideas such as plickers. Could I get you to narrow that down to one solution that you'd like to try?
That I'd like to try. It would be the live feedback.
Okay. And could you, I know we're in lockdown, we're coming towards the summer term, end of summer term. Can you give me a timeline of what you might try, when, and by what kind of deadline?
I suppose what I'd like to try is, if we've got a member of staff that's doing that well, is either the opportunity for other members of staff to go and observe that member of staff. So actually to see it live in action. If we didn't have the time to do that, then having the staff's permission to record that so that then we could use that as part of our teaching and learning communities to look at why that worked well.
Could you give me some date stamps, starting and end point?
Well, if we're thinking like now, and then I'd like to be able to then put it in place for September so that then staff felt enthused, is what I'd be able to like to do, considering we've just got 4 weeks left of this term, would be for the chance for me to video that, and then for staff to share that as part of CPD. But then what I would do, because we do insets right at the beginning of our academic year, is actually come back to that to remind ourselves about what everyone looks like.
So can I just check that during lockdown now, it's possible for you still to record teachers doing some of these ideas?
Yes.
Okay, and is it something you're already doing, or?
No, it is something that we've discussed within my leadership team within this last couple of weeks, I suppose, because we've had different year groups come back.
Okay.
And the uptake's been quite positive. We've been able to get back into the swing of things with quite a few year groups.
Okay, can I get you to identify a time when you'll raise it again with your leadership team?
Well, raise it tomorrow. I've got a leadership team meeting tomorrow. Because I say, because it is part of something that we want to look at on one of our inset days in August.
Okay, and at what point realistically do you think you'll have a bit of footage to share with the whole staff?
We'd be able to have that footage within the next couple of weeks, because the member of staff I would like to video would be available to do that. Like say next week, she'll be back into her 3rd week with that particular cohort.
So just before we finish, can I just get you to repeat what you're going to do?
What we're going to do is I'm going to video the member of staff that uses that live feedback well. Then I'm going to get the opportunity to share that with the rest of my staff and talk about why it worked well, and for them to reflect on how they could implement that into their practice. That's just food for thought prior to the summer break, and then after the summer break we'll address it again as part of our inset, so that then we can talk about what we'd expect to see within the staff's lessons.
Okay, thank you, Celia. So for everyone else watching, if Celia and I met again this time next week, I'd be saying, did you raise it with your leadership team? Have you actually set up the facility to record the lesson? Did you speak with the teacher? Are there plans in place for that person to then share it with the whole staff, etc., etc.? And then I just go back to the issue that if we didn't, or we missed it, or something happened, we just go through the script again. Now, to take it a little bit further for a bit of context, and again, I want to show you one more idea we're going to do as a group. This is a great little thing that I talk about, my verbal feedback, my live marking ideas, great little book called The Decision Book. In that book, you've got 50 ideas for strategic thinking, and this is one of them inside. If you look at the bottom left, if I said to Celia, well, you're not doing very well, you haven't raised it with your leadership team for a number of months now, that's a criticism and it's emotional and it's probably going to wind Celia up. If I said, well, you're doing really well, Celia, I can understand you're very busy and lockdown's been a bit of a distraction and things, and actually you've done X, Y, Z, Well, that's good for her ego. We all need a bit of motivation and confidence, but it's not going to really drive any improvement. So I need to frame my feedback as, like the observations we've just watched, I need to make some suggestions that are non-threatening. And obviously this will come through culture of trust and relationships. If Celia and I met on a regular basis, we'd start to break down some barriers. But I might say to Celia, why do you think that the communities aren't working? How is it worth revisiting them again? And that's a suggestion rather than a criticism or a bit of advice. So that would be my top tip. And things such as, have you considered A, B, C? And why do you think 1, 2, 3 works? And then what you do as a coach, so this at the moment is feedback, it's two-way. As a coach, I need to say less. So moving this one step further, here are 3 key techniques. The miracle question are questions like this. So I might go back to Celia's conversation next week and think, right, Celia, you've raised it with your leadership team, you've mentioned to the teacher and they're recording the video. Imagine in August, all teachers have seen 3 or 4 videos. Could you describe to me what you have done since that point? Then I sit back, I start listening and I offer non-verbal signals. And then I make sure that Celia can describe to me what success looks like. So it's really important to frame it as, imagine if live marking wasn't an issue and all teachers were doing it, describe to me what would be now happening. Okay, imagine if, describe to me. That's a really important way to frame it. So here's an example. I want to improve the quality of relationships with the boys in my class. Coach says, okay, let's imagine it's the end of term, relationships are better and how you want them to be. Describe to me what's happening. And if you find that Celia's described things and it all sounds a bit of a nightmare and way off the mark, you know that you need to shape your conversation a different way. So it gives you a bit of a framework to work with. The second one is exceptions. I'll give you an example. When I started my doctorate degree 2 years ago, I said to my supervisor, I want to research how is social media influencing education policy. He said straight away, define social media. Is it blogs, Instagram, Twitter? So obviously I'm active on Twitter and blogs. I said Twitter. He then said, describe influence. Influence who? So I had to describe that. He then said, whose policy? England, Brazil's, Uruguay? I said England's. Okay, he said, what policy? Curriculum, behaviour? I went Ofsted's. So immediately I can reshape my entire question to what influence does teachers on Twitter influence education policy in England in terms of Ofsted grading schools? So that's where my research focus is going. So it's really important to narrow the focus. Here are some questions. I would say to Celia, tell me about it. So you heard me mention that one earlier. Tell me about it, what you've done well in the past, I asked her. What I could have done is describe what you were doing then. Was the school culture different? And when did it seem more manageable? So here's an example. The boys never shut up. Well, one, you could use the miracle question. Imagine if they did shut up. Tell me what you are doing and what they are doing. Or the exceptions, let's narrow this. There's lots of boys in the class. What, all the boys, or is it just Darren and Ross and Rob and Paul? It's just Darren and Rob. Okay. Well, every lesson they never shut up. There must be times when they do. Describe to me when they do shut up. So it's allowing you to just make sure that very broad statement, you're kind of jumping in on it and to try and narrow definitions to get a little bit more clarity. Because we all say these types of things on corridor conversations with each other, so it's really important to narrow. The last one's the scaling, and that's where my card comes in. So Celia, if you can just unmute yourself. In terms of your problem, can you tell me where you are on this card? 10 being amazing, 1 being, 0 being awful.
With regard to the whole school,
yeah,
I would say we're probably, bearing in mind new staff that will be starting with us in September and things, I would say most likely at about a 5.
Okay, so what questions I would then ask are these. Why are you at a 5? What's the one thing we do to get to a 6 to get the video recorded? Mention it with the leadership team. How long is it going to take to get to a 6, Celia?
Oh, bearing in mind some of the stuff that I've got, that could hopefully take just a couple of weeks.
Okay, so then it's, you know, so the importance with coaching is to narrow the focus and set small milestones. And what I tend to do is hide the number 7, because most people go for that. So you'll find that in your own practice. So it just makes them go positive or negative. And if you work with Ross, who's a bit grumpy, and he says, I'm a 0, just reverse it. Why is it not a -1? Describe when it's a really bad day. And more importantly, as a psychologist, this is a third point of communication. So if Celia and I are having an awkward conversation, or Rob with someone in your department, it gets a bit heated. If you put this between your bodies, we then steer the focus to this card and take the heat off eye contact. And my top tip would be to use this at the start of the conversation and at the end, because if we use it at the start, let's say Celia said she was at 8, but then I unpicked lots of problems, we'll realize we're being too optimistic and actually maybe we're a 4. Or the reverse. She might be doing too harsh on herself, but actually she's an 8, she's done loads of work. So this would need 20, 30 minutes to do it first time. And then on a weekly or fortnightly basis, I would recommend 20 minutes max. Because when I look at research on memory, cognitive load is limited to about 20 minutes as adults. We can only pay attention for about an hour, 20 minutes. So those are 3 key coaching techniques, where as a coach, I say less. And then the other version, where we did the probe, which is a feedback conversation, it's a 2-way communication. So I'm allowed to interrupt and make suggestions, which is where we go wrong with coaching and mentoring. And where some of you have mentioned where people are acting as coaches, but they're actually giving NQTs loads of advice and tips rather than drawing out the solutions themselves. Now we're going to do one more technique, and this is called the tuning protocol. Now in my hard drive behind the scenes, if I just highlight where that is for you again, handouts, here we go. It is this document here, the tuning protocol. It's all on my site, and I showed you earlier the action learning videos and the podcast I'm going to send to you. And actually with John Bailey from September, we're looking for case study schools to actually practice it and get some free training from John. So if you're interested, give us a shout. So this is the method. I'm just going to add a new slide very quickly. Let's see if I can copy and paste one over. So this is the method behind this particular methodology. I'm going to ask one of you to present an issue, and then everyone else has just got to simply listen. And then after we listen, we're going to ask some clarifying questions, so the person presenting can only respond with yes or no. 2 reasons: 1, it makes the person jump off the fence, and 2, the people asking the questions, it makes you ask more pertinent questions. Okay, the third stage is, let me just reduce this font a little bit, is called individual writing. So what we would do at this stage is I would force you all to just make some notes, and you can do this during stage 2, because if I then say, or Darren calls out, for example, he interrupts everybody else's cognitive load and thought process. It's really important at this stage that we just use a moment to record what we think. And then what we're going to have is a group discussion, and this is a really interesting part, but I'm going to introduce a little bit more detail later. And then we'll go back to the presenter again at the end. So just to kind of hear the detail, you've got the presentation described, clarifying questions described, the writing, then the discussion, and then the presenter comes back to reflect. So over to you guys. Who wants to be the presenter? Who wants to? So you're going to talk publicly with the group with your problem, and it's probably going to take us about 12 minutes. So if you've got to go, it's 5 o'clock, then let us know. Otherwise, any volunteers? Or I'll choose someone.
I'm happy to go if you like.
All right, thanks, Rob. So what I want you to do is just take 3 or 4 minutes to talk about either you transition to a new school, or talk about a problem you've got in your current leadership team, or something that you are fearful of in your new school, whatever it is. But give us all the information as much as possible. Obviously, keep things confidential for the recording.
It's 17 hours.
And I'll stop you at a certain point, and I'll ask the group to do certain things in a moment. Over to you.
So there's a member of staff within the department, has been with the department for 1 year, but has previous teaching experience 4 or 5 years in another school, and is on a is somebody who has struggled with behaviour management and classroom management, and the feeling from people that have been on learning walks or done observations, or from speaking to, getting some soft data as well. The feeling is that it's mostly down to not applying policies consistently and not being able to form effective relationships with the young people in her class. There's some work being done by TLR holders and by other members of staff within the school to try and help this member of staff address these issues. And there is progress being made, but it's very, very slow. And as you can imagine, issues are beginning to build up and beginning to develop, and pressure is perhaps beginning to show. External pressures, parents, SLT, etc.
Okay, thanks.
Perhaps a concern for welfare as well.
Okay, welfare. So the rest of the group, so everybody else listening, you can ask Rob any question, but it has to be a closed question where he can only say yes or no. So think carefully about your questions, fire them to him at any point you want. You can ask 3 or 4, you can ask none, all take a turn, and then I'll bring it to a close once I think the questions are drying up. So Rob, if you can force yourself to say yes or no only, that would be very helpful. So over to you guys.
Rob, is this with every cohort that this particular member of staff teaches?
No.
With any particular year groups?
That's not a closed question, Celia, you need to ask the question again.
The younger end of the school?
No.
Is it with certificated classes, so for example GCSE?
Yes.
Is that then causing the results to dip? Are they essentially failing the children?
Yes.
Are they getting any support to improve, for example, team teaching?
Yes.
Is that making any improvement?
Yes.
But is that...
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, go on.
Is that because the other teacher is doing most of the teaching?
Yes.
Do you think they want to change?
Yes.
Do they fully understand what needs to change?
No.
Have they been given effective feedback before?
Yes.
And have they chosen to do anything about that?
Yes.
So they have improved?
Yes.
Are they meeting teacher standards?
Yes.
I take that as they are just meeting teacher standards.
Yes.
Are they a UPS teacher?
No.
So have they been given enough development training in order to improve?
Yes.
Have there been any external verification about the standard of their teaching? Besides exam results?
Can I just say yes, but in terms of, within external to the department, but not external to the school.
Okay. So I'm going to, just for time, so we could do this a little bit longer, but if I can just always get you to, for 30 seconds a minute, just make some notes about, we're going to then discuss solutions and options for Rob. And I know it's hard because we haven't seen all this problem in reality, but it can work in this type of exercise. So if you just make some notes for a minute, I'm going to leave this on the screen so you can kind of see, Rob, what happens next. So if you look particularly at number 4. Okay, everyone, I'm conscious of time. So just for context, if we were doing this physically, we would be sitting in a circle. And at this stage, I would ask Rob, not all the time, but certainly for the first time, to turn away and face away in the room. And what that does is it forces him to use his ears. So I'm going to ask Rob to keep your microphone on mute, but stay on the camera, so to speak, and try not to do any nodding or shaking your head, because I want you to just pretend that you're not looking at the rest of us. And then also everyone else, because if you were in the circle, you know that Rob was there, so you don't want to upset him, but you also want to help him, a shared problem type thing. And what you'll discover is you'll start to talk about Rob in the third person, but collectively as a group, you'll want to have your conversation, one, naturally come to a close, but all of you to have a say and offer some manageable solutions. So I'm going to sit back and listen to all you have your own conversation, and I'll just kind of give you 4 or 5 minutes till it comes to a close. And then at the end, I'm going to ask Rob to come back and just say, thank you, sod off, or I didn't think about that, or whatever it might be. And I just want you to experience the process. So Rob, if you can stay on mute, over to you, everyone else. If you can just talk, I'm not going to contribute. And if you can just talk about the problem and potential solutions for Rob.
I thought it interesting that Rob was saying that the person had done some team teaching and this was having some impact, but possibly not enough. So I wonder if one solution could be to clarify exactly what should be happening in the next step for the team teaching that would allow this member of staff to actually implement some of the suggestions.
No, I'd agree, because when I asked about the team teaching, it was the teacher that was in that was actually improving the teaching. So perhaps the lesson planning should be a bit more focused on the lesson plan to make sure that it's clear who's doing what, so more onus is put on that teacher with another teacher in the room, so they are accountable to the other person.
I don't know whether, oh sorry, go on, Darren.
No, go ahead.
I don't know whether it seems that maybe the teacher feels a little bit bombarded because it's within their department, and that they're not really feeling that they might have someone they can trust within the department, because they feel that maybe they're all talking about them behind the back. And is it possible that could they have maybe somebody from a different area of the school to maybe come in and see and get fresh ideas and a fresh light on it, so that they don't feel like it's just within the department consistently? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I wondered that also, if not a different pair of eyes, then possibly videoing. I suppose one of the questions we didn't ask Rob was actually, has this person been videoed and actually have that opportunity to view themselves? And again, that could be part of the team teaching, couldn't it? Is that next step to say, look, this is what it was like when you were teaching on your own. This is what it's like when you've team teach, when you've had that opportunity to team teach. You know, what can we do next?
Mm. I also wondered. No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I wonder if they have made some improvements. I wonder if they've been partnered up with the right person to team teach with. Perhaps that's not the right person, because they might be feeling threatened that somebody's in the room with them, because it's more, has this person, how have they been teamed up with them? And is it a case of, if they've got completely different personalities, then they might not be able to learn from them. They might need to go and watch somebody from a different department who has a similar personality to them, who they can learn from. But if they're not sure what they're looking at, then they need somebody to guide them. So I wonder if they were able to go and see somebody in a different context, or with a group that they teach, and how they deal with them. And I wonder if it's the subject knowledge that's letting them down, if it's exam classes, but they have made some improvements to the teaching and learning.
What I find quite interesting, but it seemed to be with GCSE classes, so it's great what you said there about subject knowledge, but perhaps the team teaching could be done with younger classes, so the threat wasn't there with the GCSE classes, and then you can build the subject knowledge around it, but have team teaching, so you shared pedagogical approaches and techniques within a non, for example, a year 8 class that's non-threatening, if you like, whereas there is massive accountability to young people in a GCSE class, so you could upskill them in younger classes and then let them go and trust but verify, of course, through observations, their progress with a GCSE class.
Okay, I'm going to bring it in there. Rob, can I ask you to come back to the group and share any reflections if you want?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting process to go through, to almost be in like a fly on the wall, and it's quite difficult to not make any response, but actually it's quite easy to see how your conversation has developed more naturally, because at no point has there been any elaboration. You know, there's still some suggestions and hypothesizing going on, whereas if it was a conversation involving me, perhaps I might have been tempted to make a few more clarifications and narrow that conversation. And then for me, actually, one of the most interesting comments was Darren's towards the end about taking some of the threat away. Perhaps we wouldn't have got to that point because we would have been focusing on an earlier point. And so just having that removal has kind of developed more points than perhaps we would have got to otherwise. It's a really interesting process.
Anybody else want to respond to Rob? Or so I use this model and I want to try and advocate this for appraisal purposes and for professional development, and for those schools that have got research informed cultures where schools are setting their own, teachers are setting their own research based targets rather than them being set to you, and essentially they follow. So on my template here we've got the kind of 5-minute research plan where I come as the teacher, I go to Rob, head of department, and I say, Rob, I want to find out why Bangladeshi girls keep opting out of our subject and get the worst results, and what are the reasons for it. And I want to look at year 10 and year 11. And I want to do it over the appraisal period, so 2 terms, October to June. And I'm going to research, these are the bits of research I've found already, and I'll think about the interventions, etc., etc. I then bring those first 4 or 5 boxes to my tuning protocol conversation. Rob is there, so's the CPD leader, there's a science teacher, and there's someone that's my best mate but works in the French department. And they know about my research because I've been talking about it in the pub every week. And then I've got 30 minutes to go through the whole process, but we follow the tuning protocol. And then I think about the things that I haven't thought about, and then I tweak my question here, and then it's essentially signed off for me to go off and complete this through appraisal for the academic year. And that's supported with CPD workshops throughout the year where I can disseminate my research, I can get funded to go off on the course and MAs and what have you. And the model I use for the verbal feedback research projects, I'm sure 1 or 2 of you have seen it on the site, the live mark, and Celia, if you haven't read it, please read this report about live marking. This was the model that we used. We asked the questions, this is over an academic year. We said, why is written feedback the best form of feedback? Why not speaking to kids? After all, the word assessment, etymologically speaking, means to sit beside. Why can't we sit beside kids more often and speak to them? So we investigated any research on verbal feedback. We found there was very little. So I was keen to publish some academic research to back up what we know, that when we speak to kids it works, and why teachers are leaving the profession having marked books on a Sunday night every week rather than sitting beside kids. They went off and innovated their own models, and then they came back and said, well, actually, that English class where I marked books and this English class where I trialled no marking, those kids got the same or better exam scores than the class where I always did the marking. So that's what the verbal research essentially found. So I think the tuning protocol is a really interesting model for schools that have got in that autonomy column already. You can't do that in accountability. And I would argue that even when you're in autonomy, it's hard to keep it, but you do need a small degree of accountability, which is your hymn sheet. It's your vision and values, it's your behavior policy, those types of things that keep the ship afloat. So other things in here I won't have time for. There's one thing I'm going to mention is I interviewed Professor Tina Moore, who said to me this: when people know each other well, there is less opportunity to do harm. And if you think of those colleagues that you don't know very well, or you see them leaving school at 3:30, or they don't have any exam classes anymore and it looks like they're sitting on their backside, we make assumptions about each other. And if you think back to those 3 video observations, version 1, you probably thought, I've got no idea what's happening in this lesson. It looks like a low quality lesson. I've got no idea it's an NQT, no idea what my focus is, and no idea that he actually wants help with this one child. The research she published, this book, is about the Alliance Way. It's the first bully-free school in America, in Milwaukee, I think it's called. I think the school's called the Alliance School. If you type, in fact, there's a podcast on my site, so if you just type in Tina Owen Moore, you'll be able to listen to her talk about it. Now, if you think of that quote, which has resonated with me forever since I spoke to her, think of the relationships you have with people in your teams compared to the people that you know really well compared to the people that you don't. And if you come back to that researcher cited at the very start, he says, trying to dig it out, the hallmarks of effective CPD, we assume are these 6 things. But actually, if you add a cup of tea and a slice of cake and sit and talk with someone using some of the techniques I've shown you, you can understand. So in Rob's case, that person that's underperforming, we take some of the threat away, change some of the personalities, we may ignite that teacher mojo. And I think that might stop that person leaving the profession and also stop us doing what we all hate to ourselves, is measuring and evaluating teacher quality in a one-off lesson, which I believe is impossible to do. So I'm going to leave it there, folks. The last thing that I'm going to reference to, which is probably the most critical, is this document. You can't transform school culture overnight. It's going to take you a bit of time. But what I've tried to articulate in the blogs that I've signposted and this document is how, if you look at that first column, phase 1, I think with a small core team of coaches over a good term or 2, practicing these techniques with each other so they're secure before you even release it to the rest of the school. And then before you even get to that stage, bring in a second cohort where they get the skills first, and then the second cohort start to look at the logistics of making it work at a bigger level, so with middle leaders. And then at some point, cohort 1 coach cohort 2. And then when cohort 2 are secure, you then roll it out to the whole school. And then the Achilles heel which will happen will be, why is Darren a coach and not Rob? What's the criteria for being a coach? Experienced teacher, good or outstanding? Or can I be a 55-year-old NQT, come from industry, got a wealth of experience, it's just I'm new to the classroom, but I'm actually a brilliant coach. I can ask great questions and I'm fantastic at listening. And the kids love me. It's just I'm trying to develop my subject knowledge in chemistry, which is where my professional development area for development stroke weakness is. So in the document that I've also got for you, at the back end, there's loads of facts. Now, I haven't covered them all, but what you'll get in there, if I just script to the back, I think it's in there. It's not going to load up. In fact, if you go to the 3-page summary version, I've just put in some scenarios that I faced in my leadership as a deputy head. You know, should support staff be coaches? How can you roll this out to support staff? That's often the Achilles heel with most CPD in most schools, as they're left on the sidelines. You know, where does coaching blur in mentoring? How does it influence appraisal? You know, all sorts of things. So there's lots. So I'm going to send you all these PDFs, all the slides, any of the links. I'll send you the video, which would probably take maybe an hour to compress, because we're now pushing an hour and 45 minutes. Sorry for being a bit over time. I hope it's given you some new ideas and something to think about, and somewhere where you can actually benefit from supporting other colleagues by empowering them through just simple, I believe, very basic human principles about listening, but asking really good questions at the right time. So I'll leave it there. If you want to ask some questions, stay on the line. I think it was good value for money and good use of your time. And I hope to see you again. So thank you.
Thank you, Ross.
Thanks very much, Ross.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for all taking part.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Best of luck. Bye now.
Right. Thank you very much, Ross. See you again.
Darren. See you soon. All the best. Do you finish school this Friday?
Thursday.
Thursday. All right. Have a good summer.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.